What happened with the story of Tatoba Last Dungeon? Is it a bad fantasy anime? So Tatoba Last Dungeon just finished airing, so we can talk about and discuss the contents of the show. So if you have plans to watch it in the future, this will be your only spoiler warning. But do keep in mind, I don't think this anime is really worth the trouble for most people. If you feel you have the free time to watch the anime, then by all means watch it. But in this video, we're going to be discussing what happened to the story of Tatoba Last Dungeon, or complain of a lack of a story. Tatoba Last Dungeon has currently 10 volumes of the light novel and 6 volumes of the manga. The anime only covers the first 5 volumes to probably use the next 5 volumes for season 2. The story starts out as advertised. After the heroes of the legend save the world from danger, they isolated themselves to live in peace in a village named Kulon. They agreed not to get involved in the wars of humanity, and they would only be aiding the world again from a calamity or a demon lord. The protagonist of Tatoba Last Dungeon is not the strongest among this village of heroes, but one of the weaker ones. Lloyd's goal is to go to the capital to become a soldier, like the stories he's heard of when he was a child. The point of the story is that because of Lloyd's upbringing, he looks at himself as a weak individual, but in fact, he's one of the strongest humans outside of the village. So monsters to everyone else are nothing but bugs to him. Ancient and infinitely strong magic to everyone else are nothing but clean products to him. Lloyd doesn't have common sense and has a warped view of strength. Lloyd, because of this, comes across as timid, doubtful of his own abilities. Lloyd first meets Marie, the Witch of the West, a store owner who does tasks for payment, giving a tough persona to only be crushed by Alka, Lloyd's village chief and his former master. From here, Marie acts as a roommate / aunt figure to Lloyd as he's trying to become a soldier. Next we see Celine, the cursed belt princess, and Alan, the rich noble jerk type. After he saves Celine from a monster, he uses some of his ancient magic on her belt just to try and clean it up, but he ultimately frees her from a curse, causing her to develop feelings for Lloyd. Next we see Rio, the hot mercenary thief that only cares about money. She sees his immense potential and power. Meltfawn, Chrome, and Colin are all his commanding officers that round out the rest of the cast. As a fantasy anime, I feel it can be a bit tough to stick out in terms of writing, because of its high difficulty to exactly reinvent the wheel, and as much as it's fun to see characters react more or less the same way to the same thing, fantasy animes can really be boring, if not made properly. And that's why these types of animes become either Musho Tenseis or Hachi 7th, Reincarnated Slime, or Grace of God, ReZero, Isekai Cheat Magician, and the list goes on and on. The point is, it's extremely hard to write a great fantasy anime. Every episode has to be packed and have a meaningful purpose behind them. Most first episodes start out great and generally acceptable, but shows start to really unravel by the 4 to 10 episode mark, and fans quickly see which direction the show is actually heading. Story direction. Basically, we'll be talking about where the anime went wrong and generally the things that I didn't like about the anime. The inconsistent logic at times really was a hindrance, this really being who can sense power levels and who can't. In other shows, this is almost like a bloodlust or the intent to kill, but this isn't every show. The way this usually works is that fighters can sense other fighters, but regular human beings don't see a difference. The thing is, it's a bit weird. Riho is the first one to actually sense his power, followed by Meltfawn and Chrome and Feely. They could all sense his power, but no one else could. This would make you believe some logic of only the strong can do this, but that's simply not the case. Maria is the strongest one there, out of all of them, and could never sense power, but she can somehow sense Celine's malice. Demon Lords don't sense power levels either. I assume only the fighters can sense power, but only the best fighters can do so. At least that's what I thought, but Riho really isn't a fighter, so I just felt that even being in the show was just a bit odd. You can just tell by watching Lloyd that he has immense power, or he's very much stronger than everybody else around him, without having a power scaling or a sensing of power. Did it make for sometimes funny comedic relief? Sure, but it really wasn't very useful. The main point of the show is adventure, fantasy, and comedy, but I felt like there was more of a less problem with each factor. The comedy felt boring at times and it wasn't for everyone else. The fantasy part didn't offer very much. This being the idea of a weak hero having to take on the world seemed interesting, and the adventure not having any meaning to him. But let's quickly get back to the comedy. For a lot of people, it just wasn't funny. The fact that it's not registered as a comedy on my anime list shows that what community thinks of this anime. The comedy came from running jokes and gags where we could just simply laugh at the characters themselves and make fun of them. It never really came from the actual dialogue, really. What was funny about Marie was she's being humiliated by Alka, to her leaving and then Marie coming back making some sly comment about her, to where Alka replies with a curse being sent back on her, and it was a never-ending cycle of the anime. Or Celine being some love-crazy yandere. And I really did feel like even with the comedy that they were using, it could have worked. Like say in Hinamatsuri, if they just let the characters, control the story more. Like for example, instead of us just following Lloyd for a day, we could follow Alan, where the same thing happens where Lloyd solves the problem and Alan gets the credit. You get to see Alan's real perspective, where instead of us just directly laughing at Alan for being Alan, we laugh at Alan's situation, and the audience can actually develop sympathy for the character, and down the line it could be used for more development for him if they wanted to change him later on. For me personally, I didn't have much of a problem with the anime, and I had fun watching some of Lloyd's everyday stuff. But I do understand when people really did have a problem with the whole comedy, because a lot of the point of anime is I didn't think it was a comedy, personally. The fantasy element also felt almost non-existent. This was because they were supposed to create more of a unrealistic anime, something we haven't seen before. There was nothing unpredictable or something new about this fantasy. And like I said, the adventure part was bad. This is because that directly ties into the main character. Like, what adventure is he exactly taking us on? What is his goal? If he has a more important goal, then it's more important to the audience. He wants to become a soldier, but it's not so important that he would never quit. To me, it's about how bad does the character actually want it. And for me, he doesn't cut it for me. And really to tie back into him being a soldier, he accomplishes being a soldier very early on and not really with much effort. In other shows, it's like a life or death situation or a semi-dangerous one to where the character has to accomplish the goal. But there is no threat throughout the entirety of the show. In the episode 2, he fails his test and he works at a restaurant. And it gave me a very familiar feeling to By Grace of God, where his adventuring had the same level of importance to his actual laundry service. While I didn't appreciate the disrespect Lloyd got, I'm not going to act like I was heavily invested into the character, or that he had much of a real importance. The major problem I have with the show though is the villains, or really the villains' motives. There are 3 villains in this case. 2 of them have the sole purpose of becoming villains just to make Lloyd the hero, and Yuge wanted to free all the demon lords so she could rebuild the world cause she's bored. I don't know which motive is the dumbest here. Their motives generally come down to them being bored living. Sho simply being the hero that saved the world long ago, but over time has no real reason to exist. Like other plot points with other immortal characters, he simply just wants to die, which is usually a great archetype for a character. Another point I have of why I don't like any of the villains here is the reason to commitment to being a villain. My point being is the villain is serious and people are afraid of them because they know they mean to do this, with a reasoning of why they're doing it. The villains here just felt very empty. Good villains usually command the screen time and a proper dialogue. These villains are an afterthought. It's very lazy. Throwing him into the last 2 episodes doesn't do anything for me. The audience by this point knows how it's going to end. There's no suspense to them or wonder. The villains have no actual purpose to the show, and that's when you get to the point of this show doesn't have a purpose. Like, the whole reasoning behind the show is that their whole thing is they want Lloyd to become a hero. They want Lloyd to stop them, so he's looked at by the world as a hero. Oh wait, no, a soldier. all the messed up things that they've done is for a fake clout basically. Them manipulating Roll, Abaddon, Meltfun, and all the others that Lloyd had to fight, which was not one of the reasons of why I wanted to watch this anime. So seeing that just made me feel betrayed in a way. I thought there was gonna be actual reason for them wanting to do this, a real sense to urgency in the plot. There was nothing. Now I had a couple ideas of how I would actually fix the show. In this case, Lloyd is a strong character that could beat enemies in one hit. Therefore, a isekai One Punch Man. The reason why it's better is obvious. They have similarities. Both main characters want to pursue a childhood dream, and they are the strongest people around. Where they differ is the focus. Most, if not half of the episode is focused on new people of the episode, while Saitama is messing around doing whatever Saitama does. The new characters all have some type of goal that's really meaningful to them, only to fight some big, strong villain that they could never possibly defeat. In a way, the entirety of the show is just them trying to push their limits, but never being able to do so. Them realizing that they could never obtain what they're trying to get right here, just to have some guy come in and one-hit their problems at the last minute. You can say what you want, but One Punch Man has its own type of actual meaning. The characters in this anime have no real goals. Scratch that. They have goals, but they all get crossed off or labeled not important because of Lloyd's almost half-hearted goal. Next is, how would we want to fix the comedy if we want to go the whole comedy route? We can make this the Hinamatsuri of isekai. This is honestly something you've seen a couple of times before. You might be asking yourself, well, how do they become a Hinamatsuri of isekai? It's honestly not as hard or complicated as you might think. We've seen it a couple of times before, actually. And by now, it's been replicated and been shown to be more effective than trying to make a One Punch Man isekai. Konosuba, Cautious Hero, Mayo-sama, and to a much lesser extent, Princess Connect. The main objective of the show is comedy, where they go through their own everyday life while just being in a fantasy. It's like saying, make comedy the fantasy, not fantasy the comedy. If you're confused, don't worry, I was too. The point is, the reason why Konosuba is funny is because of its just 4 lovable idiots doing what they do. The reason why Cautious Hero is funny is because he's disregarding what everyone else wants him to actually do. And Mayo-sama. Mao is having a misunderstanding and arguments with Amelia the entirety of the show. These shows could work in any setting and don't require them to be in a fantasy anime to make them or be found funny. Tatoba's whole thing is, wow, this kid is really strong. That's unexpected. It has more to do with his actual physical attribute and less with the character himself. And when it comes down to, like I said, the other characters, we're simply just laughing at them, not growing with what happened over the last 5 minutes. It's just, wow, she's a yandere. That's pretty funny. She's doing yandere things. That's the whole joke. So, characters and reviews. I think in general, these characters can be judged a little bit too harshly, and that's the same with the actual review of this anime. This anime didn't annoy me like it did for other people. Maybe that's a bit of my recency bias or resentment from watching a Sister's All I Need anime. And before I say anything, I know that name. I know. I know. Just hear me out right now. Just hear me out for a second and just listen to the summary. So, if you have not seen the show, a quick summary of the show is it's all about a bunch of young adult writers who are all hanging out in this apartment together, and they're just, doing weird stuff, getting inspiration from odd places, doing their normal day-to-day life and the life of being a writer. And they have a particular scene that I'm trying to mention here. And that scene is about one of the friends getting their manga transformed into an anime in that process. And quickly, after he's spent so much time trying to make this manga, to make this anime as successful as it possibly can, he's doing social media posts, he's making sure to be in the meeting offices all the time, because like I said, I don't know why I had to get into this like online a couple days ago, but literally the person who makes the anime is in the meeting for the actual anime. They still have to go and sign off on these episodes, all right? I've already made a video about this, but quickly, if you didn't know, same thing here. He's doing as much as he possibly can to make this anime as successful as it can be. But basically, he's watching it for the first time live like everybody else, and he's online and he's seeing his anime being picked apart piece by piece, made a joke of, from his own online fan group who know nothing about what he's done to get this far, and they don't really give it a chance at all. And because of that, I want to tone down some of the harsher critics or harsher critiques of the anime. And if you're like me, I didn't have much of a general problem with watching the anime. But let's go through the actual list of characters and just talk about them very briefly. Like I said, the level of importance they gave to him being an adventurer was the same as him just working at the restaurant. It didn't have any importance, really, at all. Celine, she could have actually had a really good and respectable character arc. Having a cursed belt on her face, the entirety of that, being bullied throughout her life because of it, and not having her own father respect her like she would want to be respected. She is freed from this so-called curse and this pain. I think this happened a little bit too early on into the anime. We didn't get any real arc from her being what she was to what she is now. There's no sense of you knowing this character or growing with this character. There's none of that. Her character could have been, her trying to prove herself, her trying to be more independent. Instead, you get none of that. And she's just another drooling yandere beast character who just wants the main character's D. And because Celine is Celine, and Marie, like I said, being an aunt figure to Lloyd, and Philo really coming into the cast very later on to the anime is shipping Riho with Lloyd, and it's just kind of like that probably should have been Celine because of how much they messed up her character in terms of actual writing her character, was how much they messed up. It's made too much of a joke, and there's no actual development of the character. She's not a likable character in any regard. And then there's Marie. Marie was generally fine for the most part, but her problem isn't really her herself. It's really because of Lloyd, because of how they treated her problem of the demon lord killing her family, and it becomes very insignificant in the whole plot of the anime. It should have been more of a bigger character arc, a more story-driven type of plot, but it really was nothing. The thing is with that is, sure, like I said, it could have been like One Punch Man. He shows up, and the whole thing with me when I'm looking at this is, generally she still could have won even without Lloyd. If she would have had friends in this anime, she would have won earlier on in the anime. All she would need is a couple soldiers to go take on the Demon Lord, because hey, she was basically only a little bit weaker than the Demon Lord when I was watching the anime. So that means you have a couple more capable soldiers that can actually handle themselves, semi can hold their shit. She would have been fine going against the Demon Lord. Her whole plot just felt very wanky. Alka, not much of a problem, it's just she's just a worse version of Hestia, and she just felt very cringe watching. Riho, honestly, could have been a very decent plot, but left me asking a little bit more questions than me just trying to enjoy it. Like, why is it that the headmaster of the school is able to actually fight in the school competition? I've never seen that before. Why is she such a jerk in general? What exactly is her reasoning for being greedy again? Is she like Nami and she wants to use it for a good cause, or is she just like Nami and really likes having money? I don't know. Riho just didn't feel like a real complete character, even though I felt like she could have been a complete character. I felt like she was probably out of the rest of the group the next most important character, But that was kind of by default and not by design, and that's not good. And my final thoughts of the anime. So, as a final thought of the anime, the story is a 1 out of 5. The animation is like a 2.5. The sound was a 2. The characters were being nice, a 2. And overall, my enjoyment of watching the anime is like a 2.5 because I was pretty much easy watching. I don't really rate too many animes that poorly, so it's kind of like a given. If I were to add everything up and then divide it, it would be a 2 out of 5. And even though it's a 2 out of 5 on my books, I still wouldn't watch this anime again. I would watch maybe like a 2-minute clip of the anime on YouTube, and that would be it. And here's some say show lookalikes you can go watch that I found. So from these animes, which of them would you actually consider watching? A. Kenja no Mago. B. Hachi the 7th. C. Kamitachi. Or D. would rather just not watch anime at all today. I chose D. I would rather just not watch anime for today. And I didn't. I was actually watching The Boys instead of watching anime today. Pretty good. Pretty good series. So make your choice. A through D. That's gonna do it for the video. See you next time.